A dog's desperate barks save his owner from the brink of death. Tom adjusted the straps of his hiking backpack as the morning sun bathed the rugged mountains in a golden glow. The trail ahead stretched upward, winding through dense patches of pine trees that seemed to whisper in the breeze. The crisp air carried the earthy scent of damp soil and fresh needles, grounding him in the present moment. He inhaled deeply. Beside him, Echo, his loyal German shepherd, sniffed the air, his ears perked for any unusual sounds. Echo's sharp, alert eyes scanned the surroundings, always on watch. He was more than just a pet. He was a partner, a protector, and a living reminder of a past filled with both purpose and peril. Tom was in his late 40s, with a strong, weathered face that reflected years of hard experiences. His dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples, and his short beard framed a square jaw that spoke of resilience. Deep-set blue eyes carried both warmth and the weight of old memories. Despite his solid build, there was a subtle weariness to the way he moved, as though the burdens of his past still lingered on his shoulders. He wore sturdy hiking boots, cargo pants, and a long-sleeved flannel shirt. Every piece of his attire was practical and well-worn from countless outdoor treks. Echo, on the other hand, was a picture of canine strength and agility. His black and tan coat gleamed in the sunlight, highlighting his muscular frame. Standing tall and proud, his ears were erect, and his dark brown eyes held a mix of intelligence and loyalty. A faint scar along his right flank hinted at the dangers he had faced in the line of duty. Despite his imposing appearance, there was a gentleness in his manner when he was near Tom. The bond between them was palpable, forged through years of trust and life-threatening missions. They had been inseparable since their days in military service. Echo had once been a decorated search and rescue dog, trained to navigate danger with precision and bravery. Tom had been his handler, the two of them forming a partnership built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Together, they had saved lives in some of the most perilous situations imaginable: earthquake zones, flood-stricken towns, and conflict areas. But those days were behind them now. Both man and dog were retired, though the memories of their missions lingered like shadows on a bright day. The mountains had become their refuge. Here, they could escape the noise and chaos of the world. Hiking was their shared ritual, a way to stay connected to each other and to the land. The rhythmic crunch of their boots and paws on gravel brought a sense of calm to Tom's mind. Yet beneath his steady exterior was a quiet struggle. The doctor's voice echoed in his mind, cautioning him to be mindful of his heart. Years of high-stress missions had taken their toll, and now he had to watch for signs of trouble. But Tom trusted Echo's instincts more than any medical advice. Echo had an uncanny ability to sense danger, whether it came from hidden threats or from Tom's own body. "Looks like we're in for another adventure, buddy," Tom said softly as they climbed higher. The gentle rustle of wind through the trees accompanied his words. Echo's tail wagged in response, a subtle but reassuring gesture. Tom smiled. Echo's presence always had a calming effect on him. It was as if the dog could sense his thoughts and emotions without needing words. The path steepened ahead, and for a moment, Tom's vision blurred. He blinked and shook his head, trying to clear the fog that seemed to cloud his senses. The warm sun, once a comfort, now felt heavy on his shoulders. His heartbeat quickened, a deep, uncomfortable pounding in his chest. A sharp pain stabbed through his left arm, radiating toward his shoulder. "What's this?" he muttered under his breath, his voice barely above a whisper. He pressed a hand to his chest, as if that would somehow calm the storm raging inside him. Echo, walking a few steps ahead, stopped suddenly. The German shepherd's ears twitched, his sharp instincts sensing something was wrong. Tom took a deep breath and tried to keep moving. His boots scraped against the rocky trail as he forced one foot in front of the other. The world tilted slightly, and nausea bubbled in his stomach. He stumbled, catching himself against a large boulder. "Just a little more," he murmured, trying to reassure himself. But the pain didn't fade. If anything, it grew sharper, spreading from his chest to his jaw and back. Cold sweat trickled down his temples. He swayed on his feet and looked up at the path ahead. The summit was close, but it felt unreachable now. Echo trotted back to him, eyes full of concern. He let out a low whine and nudged Tom's leg with his nose. "I'm okay, boy," Tom said, his voice strained. He wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. The pain surged again, and this time his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the ground, the rough gravel digging into his hands and knees. He gasped for air, but it felt like his chest was in a vice. Echo barked sharply, the sound echoing through the quiet forest. He circled Tom, his tail stiff and ears alert. He barked again, louder this time, as if calling for help. When no response came, he returned to Tom's side and nudged his face. "Echo," Tom whispered, his voice barely audible. He struggled to stay conscious. The world around him dimmed at the edges. He needed Echo to understand. They had trained for emergencies like this, though never under these exact circumstances. He had to give the command. With trembling fingers, he reached for Echo's collar. The dog stayed perfectly still, watching him with intense focus. Tom's lips moved slowly as he forced out a single word, "Seek." It was a command they had used many times during their service missions. It meant Echo needed to find help, fast. Echo's ears twitched at the familiar word. His body tensed as he processed the command. He sniffed Tom one last time, as if making sure of his condition, then gave a short bark of acknowledgement. Without hesitation, he turned and sprinted down the trail. Tom watched him go, his vision fading in and out. He lay back against the cool ground, trying to breathe through the pain. His mind drifted to memories of their missions together. He remembered the times they had saved others, how Echo had found trapped victims in the aftermath of earthquakes and led survivors to safety. Now, it was his turn to rely on the dog. "Come on, boy, you can do it," he whispered before his eyes closed. Echo raced down the trail, his paws kicking up dust and pebbles. His nose worked overtime, sniffing for any sign of other hikers. His mind was sharp, focused on the task. Every instinct told him time was critical. He had to find someone who could help Tom. The forest stretched endlessly before him, but Echo was undeterred. He crossed a narrow stream with a leap, his paws splashing briefly in the cold water. He paused only for a moment to listen. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind rustled the trees, but there were no human voices. As Echo continued, he suddenly froze in place, his ears perking and his nose twitching furiously. A deep, guttural growl reverberated through the trees ahead. Echo's muscles tensed as he caught sight of a massive brown bear emerging from the underbrush, its eyes locking onto him. The bear's fur bristled as it stood on its hind legs, towering over the forest floor. Echo knew the signs of danger instantly. This was not an encounter he could win through confrontation. The bear let out a deafening roar, sending birds scattering from the treetops. Echo's instincts kicked in. He barked fiercely, hoping to intimidate the bear, but it only seemed to enrage the beast further. The bear charged, and Echo darted to the side, narrowly avoiding a swipe of its powerful claws. He ran, weaving through trees and leaping over fallen logs as the bear gave chase. Echo's lungs burned, and his injured flank throbbed as he zigzagged to avoid the bear's pursuit. At one point, he stumbled over a rock, and a searing pain shot through his side as the old scar reopened. Blood matted his fur, but he pushed through the pain, knowing he couldn't stop. The bear eventually slowed, losing interest as Echo put more distance between them. Panting heavily, Echo limped toward a stream and waded into the cool water, letting it soothe his wound. He drank deeply before carefully stepping out onto the bank. His body ached, but his mission was far from over. Shaking off the water, he pressed forward with renewed determination. The trail became more treacherous, with steep inclines and narrow ledges, but Echo navigated them with practiced skill. His senses remained alert despite the exhaustion weighing him down. He climbed over boulders, crossed another stream, and pushed through thick underbrush. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he caught a scent, faint but unmistakable. Humans. His ears perked up, and he followed the trail of scent with urgency. The path led him to a small group of hikers resting near a clearing. They were laughing and talking, unaware of the approaching dog. Echo barked loudly, startling them. Whoa! Where did he come from? One of the hikers exclaimed, standing up quickly. Echo barked again and ran a few steps back toward the trail, then turned to look at them. He repeated the action, barking insistently. I think he wants us to follow him, a woman said, her brow furrowing in concern. Yes, something's wrong, another hiker added. Look at him. He's not just lost. Echo barked once more, his eyes locking onto theirs with an intensity that left no room for doubt. The hikers quickly gathered their things and followed him, jogging to keep up with his swift, limping pace. Back on the trail, Tom's breathing had grown shallow. His chest rose and fell in uneven intervals as if each breath required a monumental effort. His mind floated in a haze of pain and exhaustion, barely registering the world around him. The distant rustling of leaves and faint bird calls blurred together, creating a disorienting cacophony. He was on the edge of consciousness, teetering between awareness and darkness. Echo reached him first, his paws skidding slightly on the loose gravel as he slowed. His barks rang out in the still forest, sharp and insistent, demanding attention from anyone within earshot. He circled Tom protectively, his body tense and his senses heightened. His ears swiveled, catching the faintest sounds of movement in the distance. The instinct to guard and defend was strong, but so was his drive to see Tom cared for. He nudged Tom's arm with his nose, letting out a soft whine of concern. Tom stirred slightly at the touch, his eyelids fluttering open for a brief moment. His vision was blurry, but he recognized the familiar silhouette of his loyal companion standing over him. Echo, good boy, he whispered hoarsely. His voice was barely audible, a strained croak that carried both gratitude and relief. His lips twitched in a faint attempt at a smile before he slipped back into unconsciousness. Echo's eyes remained locked on Tom's face for a moment longer, as if silently assuring himself that his human was still with him. He then stood rigid, ears perked and nostrils flaring as he detected approaching footsteps. The scent of humans reached him, mingling with the earthy aroma of the forest floor. Echo barked again, this time in a shorter, more deliberate tone, signaling urgency. Within moments, a group of hikers emerged from the underbrush. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to alarm as they took in the scene before them. Whoa, what happened here? One of the men exclaimed, rushing forward. Echo's posture relaxed slightly as he recognized that help had finally arrived. He moved aside just enough to allow the hikers access to Tom, but he remained close, his gaze never straying far from his handler. One of the hikers, a man in his 30s with a medical kit strapped to his pack, knelt beside Tom and quickly assessed his condition. He pressed 2 fingers to Tom's neck, searching for a pulse. He's alive, but his pulse is weak, the man said urgently. We need to call for help now. A woman nearby nodded and pulled out her phone, her hands trembling slightly as she dialed emergency services. Yes, we have a man in critical condition on the East Mountain Trail. He's unconscious and needs medical attention, she reported, providing their location as precisely as she could. Meanwhile, the other hikers busied themselves with whatever immediate assistance they could offer. One removed a jacket and draped it gently over Tom to provide warmth. Another checked his breathing and repositioned his head to ensure his airway was clear. Echo observed every movement with keen attention. His body remained tense, but there was a calm determination in his eyes. He lay down beside Tom, his injured flank aching but forgotten in the moment. His fur was matted with dried blood from the encounter with the bear, but he showed no signs of distress. His sole focus was on staying by Tom's side until he was safe. This dog, he led us here, the woman said softly, glancing at Echo with awe. If it weren't for him, who knows how long it would have taken to find this man. The man tending to Tom glanced at Echo with a nod of respect. Yeah, he's a hero, he said. He reached out tentatively to pat Echo's head, but stopped short when Echo's intense gaze met his. The dog's eyes were not hostile, but they conveyed a clear message. I am not leaving him. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity as they waited for emergency responders. The hikers spoke in hushed tones, mindful of the seriousness of the situation. One of them kept a lookout for the approaching rescue team, while another kept track of Tom's vital signs. Finally, the distant sound of helicopter blades echoed through the valley. Echo's ears twitched at the noise, and he lifted his head slightly. The hiker's tension eased as the sound grew louder, signaling that help was near. Within minutes, a team of paramedics arrived, descending swiftly from a helicopter that had landed on a nearby clearing. They carried medical equipment and a stretcher, moving with practiced efficiency. The lead paramedic approached Tom and began a thorough assessment while another administered oxygen. His pulse is stabilizing, but he's still weak, one paramedic reported. They prepared in 4-line and carefully loaded Tom onto the stretcher. Echo rose to his feet and followed closely, his movements slow and labored due to his own injuries. The paramedic noticed the dog and frowned. "Hey, this dog's hurt too. We'll need to check him out," he said. "He's been through a lot," the woman hiker explained. "He's the one who found us and brought us here." The paramedic nodded in understanding. "We'll take care of him. Let's get them both to safety." As Tom was lifted into the helicopter, Echo hesitated for a brief moment at the edge of the loading platform. His ears flicked nervously at the unfamiliar machinery, but a soft word of encouragement from one of the paramedics eased his anxiety. He jumped aboard and settled beside Tom, resting his head on the man's arm. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them away from the rugged wilderness that had tested their bond once again. Echo's eyes remained open, watching over Tom with unwavering loyalty. Despite the pain and exhaustion coursing through his body, he would not rest until he was certain his friend was safe. This was his duty, his purpose, and he had fulfilled it without fail.